Welcome back to Worldview. Thank you very much for staying with us. All right, so right now we want to have that conversation here in studio, just taking a look at just how the week was in regards to some top stories that made headlines outside our borders and also within. Abel Oyeyo, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I want us to start on a very unfortunate note, and that, of course, is the number of deaths that we've been having this month. Actually, it's like a dark month. We've lost quite a number. Actually 4 in total of high-profile individuals who influenced, our past in one way or another. And there have been conversations, hopefully we don't have, more of this death. But let's start with Bethel Kiplagat. How would you describe him as? Because on one hand, he really was instrumental in things to do with peace talks in South Sudan, in Somalia. But on the other hand, there are very many castigations against him here at home about his alleged, involvement in the Wagala massacre, among other things. So it's really, very conflicting. But how, as an expert, would you describe him as?
Well, I think Ambassador Kiplagat has a very unique position, especially for young Kenyans, because people like me have grown up hearing very good things about him. He was behind the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, and he came up with a very wonderful report that I think has not been totally examined and implemented. And of course, he played a very vital role in the Southern Sudan peace process. So that is the much we know. Of course, the lives we lead have got a good side and a dark side. So I think Kenya has lost a giant for peace. It's unfortunate it's happening in July when we need so much calm and peace, of course, as we approach the general election. And it's also unfortunate because it happened when we're experiencing so many again deaths. Of course, we have CS dying, there's Biwot, and of course Gigi.
All right.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, he was very instrumental in really trying to to sort of like solemnize, the past that we've had here in the country through that report that has not been implemented or even tabled in Parliament. What would he want in regards to that report? Because even when he was alive, of course, there have been conversations about implementing that report, but it didn't happen until right now. But what is it that he would want?
Of course, it's all about going through the report itself and examining the findings. There's some things we can do, of course. It doesn't mean we go back to the past and begin punishing people, but there's a process in which it can be done where guys can come out and admit to wrongs they've committed and ask for forgiveness, like it happened in South Africa. So that is what you could want to do. The report has to be examined.
What happened in South Africa maybe for?
Yeah. Guys were given a chance to come out and admit mistakes they made. Yeah, some guys were actually requested to face the guys they offended, the victims, and say, for example, I killed your dad. So, the guy could decide to either forgive you or not. And, that kind of conversation led to forgiveness. So that is why there has to be truth first, there has to be justice, then reconciliation. So for us to access justice, we have to know what happened. That is what the report does. So I think I could want to see that report examined very, very scrutinized accordingly, and all the implementations, the recommendations implemented by the government.
All right. Yeah. But also, Abel, going by who we are as Kenyans and how sometimes react, to issues, do you think that this report should just be dead and buried so that we do not have to start sort of like reigniting some previous, some pains from the past?
That is kicking the can down the road. Actually, we're postponing a problem. There is a national conversation we need about what we've always referred to historical injustices, and what the kind of enmity and bad blood we're experiencing now, especially between some tribes, and is based on that conversation which we're not having. So, for example, we don't admit that we're tribes. We want to pretend we don't exist. We don't want to admit we vote along tribal lines. We do that all the time. So even guys in the media don't say it. So, for example, saying Kikuyus will vote Uhuru Kenyatta is considered some kind of taboo. So that is a national conversation you need to have. I think that is the best way to heal. When you brought examples from places like the United States, when African Americans came out and voted Obama, it was said 95% of African Americans supported Obama because they excited about the black president. So that is not a bad thing. We have to accept our identity as Kenyans who belong to tribes. So the report has to be examined. The recommendations which were made, of course, not all of them implemented.
All right.
That is for the betterment of a nation.
Of our country.
Yeah.
All right. The other high-profile individual, Nicholas Biwott, also passed away earlier in the week, and his death also came as a shock to Kenyans.
Surprise.
It's actually a surprise, but also for him, he was not really in the public light for some time, and it was said that he was battling some illnesses in the background.
Yeah.
What is it that you would remember mostly about this total man?
I've taken around 4 months to look at the life of Biwott, and of course, yes.
This is 4 months?
Yes, before of course he died.
Okay.
There were rumors of him dying sometimes back.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate, of course. One thing that struck me is the brilliance of the man. Yeah, of course we have bad stories how he was possibly involved in some executions and assassinations, which of course remain to be speculations. But the guy, the history is that of a hardworking man who knew where to put his effort, and he died leaving behind a huge empire. So he was a hardworking fellow.
He was a hardworking man. All right, let's leave that. And also Gigi Kariuki is being buried today.
Yeah.
All right, so we want now to also talk about Donald Trump. He never misses in our conversations because he's always up to something.
Yeah.
At least this time round it's not something controversial, but he is in France. But what is interesting is actually the differences between the two leaders, the French President Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump, and especially coming at a time when the US said, we want out from the climate agreement. And right now Trump is seemingly softening his stance and saying that, actually I must just rethink this. What do you think has led on to that?
I think Emmanuel is a very bright guy. He's been able to see the way Putin has been playing, with Trump. Trump is very excitable, very, very easily. So what he's done is to give him some kind of platform. So it's made Trump feel significant, and in return, he wants to consider and say, okay, I think maybe the deal should be done supported. So that is what Emmanuel has done. He's actually cornered him. He's given him what he likes. Trump likes a good show, and I think he's gotten one. Now back home, of course, it's hot. Impeachment articles have been, launched by two Democratic congressmen, so it's not all that nice. Yeah,
actually, that was the next question. But even before we come to that impeachment plot by the Democrats, there's also something to do with France, and of course Emmanuel Macron. He's seemingly like friendlier to President Donald Trump if you compare him to Angela Merkel of Germany, and you also have Theresa May, who seemingly does not really care about what Trump does or not, and she's also busy dealing with Brexit. So how important is it for Trump to have Macron on his side, even to the lowest level?
Well, I don't think Emmanuel is so much into Trump. What he's trying to do is to find a way. I think he's trying to get him. You remember the handshake? Yeah, so he's been trying to learn Trump from the word go. And unlike Merkel and May, I think he wants to find a way to get some concessions, and the US plays a very vital role in the world stage, and they cannot afford to just let him be. That is what the British Prime Minister and of course the German leader wants to do. They want to actually let Trump be on his own, but we cannot afford to do that. So Emmanuel wants to find a way in which they can be able to take advantage of the US without necessarily involving Trump so much. So by giving him a stage and trying to be friendly to him, it's likely to concede and let the US be part of the Paris climate deal. So it's not so much about being friendly, it's about playing with his psychology. Yeah, the same Putin way.
Isn't that unfortunate? Playing with the psychology.
It's what it is.
It's so basic.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the trouble that he left at home, and there is that ploy or plot by Democrats to impeach him. First of all, how possible is it going to be?
That is a long shot. I don't think it should get anyone excited, but there is a problem. I think around 2-3 days ago, the Sun disclosed some emails whereby it was revealed that he had contact with some Russian lawyer who had promised damaging information about Hillary. And I think that is now what we call collusion. Yeah, the special counsel was given permission to investigate the possibility of any of the Trump guys having contact with the Russian, operatives in trying to exchange information and coordinate so as to interfere with the US election. Now the emails disclose that. So the impeachment article that was launched might appear to be a long shot, but there's evidence now that is going to back it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's tough.
So it's not that easy, really.
Well, it will take time, but the evidence is available from what I'm seeing. There is evidence now.
Wow.
Yes.
So Trump could be
impeached.
Could be impeached.
It can take a year, maybe 1.5 years, but it can happen.
But he's already done so much, so much. I don't think it can be. It could take also a long time for it to be undone, for the things that he's done to be sort of like undone.
Yeah.
All right. Let's also come back closer to home and talk about what is happening in Uganda. And there's that bill that was introduced to have the presidential age limit scrapped off.
Yes.
I mean, that would mean that, you know, somebody like Museveni will be there for another term, actually for life, until maybe something happens.
Yeah.
How retrogressive would that be?
I think that is
if it would be.
That is it's unfortunate. Just like what we witnessed in Rwanda some times back, there was a petition, of course, to interfere with the limits, term limits, which of course was changed. So on the 4th of August, I expect Kagame to be elected president for the last 7-year term, which of course again gives him permission to run twice. So he could be president.
But don't you think it's a different ball game for Rwanda? Don't they still need a solid leader like Kagame? Also considering where they've come from. Last time we had a conversation here and we said what is done is okay. What he did when he was elected, when he came to power in 1994 after the genocide, he's been able to do good, for the country. Of course, he put together, but again, he's done very bad things. He's stifled the democracy, does not allow the opposition to thrive. He does not allow a free press, and Rwandans do things not because they love the president, but because they fear. We've had cases of guys being followed all the way to South Africa and get killed. Some minister was killed in Kenya here some times back. So that is what's happening in Rwanda. Now in Uganda, it is unfortunate because what it means is Museveni might be president for life. So guys who were born when Museveni took over as president will get to their maybe 50s or 40s seeing one president. All right. Yeah, and of course, as we said, the beauty of having different leaders over time is getting new ideas. So the Ugandans will be able to miss that, the Rwandese will miss that. But the other thing really, that presidential age limit, what does it mean for Africa? Because you have very many leaders who want to still cling to power. Obviously, power is sweet, but what really does this would this mean for the African continent that will not have that refreshed way of thinking every time a new leader actually comes in? Yeah, so we'll be able to miss ideas, and then of course number two, it means we actually making what we call negative steps. Over the last, I think, 15 years, Africa has made tremendous progress in terms of democracy. But again, what we're seeing is a backward march. Of course, there's Zimbabwe, now there's Uganda and Rwanda. Now, the problem we have is we have very few countries which can stand up to some of these dictatorships and tell their leaders what you're doing is unacceptable. Again, as we say, daily, it's all about equity. When you come to equity, you have to come with clean hands. Yes. So most of the African leaders have their own challenges back home, and they don't have a moral high ground to stand and say, hey, Kagame, get out. Museveni, don't do that. So they feel like they have a free ground to play. All right. Yeah. Finally, let's now talk about what's happening at home. And of course, today is a very important day. The Court of Appeal is listening to that appeal by IEBC. Basically, if analysts are saying that basically IEBC wants this the ruling that was made to just be nullified. This issue to do with public participation, according to the IEBC, is neither here nor there. What can we expect from this ruling? Because also IEBC is crying foul that indeed they have just a few days to really prepare for this election. Now, of course, it's illegal to speculate on a court process. Yes, but I think the appeal might go through. That's where my odds are now, and that means, of course, the printing of the presidential ballot papers will go forward as planned. Now, with Al Ghurair. Yes. Okay. And of course, as you can remember, the bench, the three judges came out and said the allegation of the president having met the executives from the company was baseless because they were based on newspaper cuttings. Yes. There was no evidence. So that means the cancellation itself was actually not based on any solid premise. And IEBC has a very solid case. We have to hold an election on the 8th of August. We don't have time. The whole process of public participation, talk about procurement, and possibly they get like 6-7 companies, get one company.
give a tender will take a very long process. And what that means is we'll get into the territory of a constitutional crisis if we don't have an election on the 8th of August as stipulated in the Constitution.
All right.
So IBC makes a very solid case in the appeal, and it's my prayer that they can go ahead and grant it.
All right.
So all we have to do is to make sure the opposition and the government are given protections to a free and fair election. I think it's okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Abel Oye, for your time. He is from the Center for African Progress, and he's also an expert on matters international. All right. So we want to continue with our coverage, and authorities in Gambia have begun to seize properties belonging to the country's exiled former leader Yahya Jammeh in an ongoing drive to regain assets that officials say Jammeh acquired using state funds. The heavily fortified country estate is littered with evidence of the eccentric authoritarian's extravagant lifestyle. But as Gambia's new government, with backing from the World Bank and the United States, seeks to claw back assets they consider looted, a recent visit there demonstrated just how arduous that task might be. Lilian Odera has the details.
Kanilai is one of the properties recently visited by authorities. The heavily fortified property was littered with evidence of the eccentric authoritarian's extravagant lifestyle. In a warehouse on Jammeh's sprawling country estate, silver platters are piled up beside dusty crates of empty champagne bottles with labels commemorating the 1994 coup that brought him to power.
It has been alleged that so much property has been amassed by the former president to himself for personal aggrandizement. But then, I would not be in a position to be judgmental. I could only speak on what I've seen so far on face value. But then the extent of all of these things would come out at the end of the exercise, when a determination would have been made in terms of the property in issue, and that would now be left to whatever recommendation is made with respect to the properties that may be confiscated or otherwise.
Jammeh, accused by opponents and rights groups of widespread human rights violations and corruption, fled Gambia in January as regional forces descended on the capital Banjul to enforce the results of an election he lost. He now resides in Equatorial Guinea, and new President Adama Barrow is attempting to exert his control over the country by reversing some of Jammeh's worst abuses.
Vehicles, you have containers here, in the house, you have air conditioners, chairs and so forth, and all those things should be in the possession of the Attorney General. Yes,
Gambia's High Court bailiff charged with taking inventory of Jammeh's remaining possessions. Kanilai, with its farm, mosque, tanks, multiple residences, a jungle warfare training camp, and vast private safari park housing exotic parrots, zebra, hyenas and camels, is Jammeh's most elaborate estate. Building material and a crane next to an unfinished new palace testify to plans to embellish further. By the end of his 22-year rule, authorities believe Jammeh had acquired some 200 residential and business properties in the tiny riverside nation, nearly half of whose 1.8 million people live in poverty. But despite its grandeur, it represents only a fraction of his total holdings, and the task force, composed of 11 court, police, intelligence, military officials, and the help of the Central Bank Financial Intelligence Unit, has a tough job ahead.
Our budget, there is nothing there. Everything is corrupt. Gambia, everything is corrupt. People are tired. We need changes, and we believe that this new government must bring the changes. Yeah, that's the hope we are praying. Every both day and night we are praying that the kids are roaming. They have no schools. They are homeless. We never know.
Jammeh's personal economic interests appear to be inherently intertwined with Gambia's tiny economy, described by the International Monetary Fund in July as broken.
The people at Kanilai, the soldiers at Kanilai, have done a good job by keeping the place intact. Contrary to what I've heard, from other sources, what I found in Kanilai is that it is very organized. the officer in charge, Major So, have done a good job. I've been round and I did not see anything vandalized. Everything is intact. The place is maintained.
Many Gambians believe Jammeh drew out exit talks from days in order to pack his belongings, including a cargo plane from Chad loaded with luxury cars, now believed to be with Jammeh in Equatorial Guinea. Those assets too are likely now out of the reach of investigators. Lilian Odera, KTN News.
Very interesting piece there by Lilian Odera. Alright, so we want to close now. Well, we thank you very much for watching. My name is Betty Kello. We'll be seeing you later on at 9 p.m. on Friday briefing. And tonight my guest anchor is the Nairobi woman representative aspirant, Esther Pasari. She's coming on the show this evening as my guest anchor. You better watch out for that. 9 p.m. is the time. Till then, keep it KTN News and we'll see you later. Goodbye.